afternoon, everyone. Mark here. I'm Technical Practice Manager at Planet Technologies, focused on both our collaboration business for Office 365, as well as our Azure App Platform. And it's been a couple of months since I've been able to kind of come and speak a little bit about things that are new with the platform. We had an amazing summer here. It was fantastic in a lot of ways, including just the time demand. And I am excited to kind of get back into this here as we've closed out our fiscal year end. For those that potentially missed the last video of this series, we had an awesome year, and we saw fantastic growth in both our teams here and in technologies. And of course, there were a lot of really exciting technologies that came out for the app platform this summer, everything from .NET Core 3 release to general availability, as well as Azure Data Share and some other things like that hopefully we can talk about kind of in subsequent videos. And I have a feeling with Ignite just around the corner, we're going to get a lot of other really cool announcements to talk about too. Now this week I had the opportunity to spend time with folks at Redmond here, and I left both encouraged by the continued investments Microsoft's making in their data platform capabilities, as well as called to play my part where I can in our own customers' maturity story. And so today what I wanted to do, like I did for the DevOps portion of this, is just talk with all of you a little bit about Planet Technologies' vision and goal for the capability maturity model for the Azure Data Platform, how we kind of envision it, and some things we're trying to do this year to help align ourselves with Microsoft's goals as well in your maturity story. So again, for those that potentially missed the last video, I really want to focus on a product that we've developed internally. It's called the Cloud Maturity Model. It's based on the Capability Maturity Model, and it's focused on cloud technologies. And specifically, I want to talk about the area here in sort of the violet color, data and intelligence. In our last video, we looked at the development operations section. I'm going to kind of go from left to right here. So we're going to start kind of on-prem and, of course, get to what we believe are more advanced capabilities using Azure Data Platform. And I will share with you some insights that I believe are relevant along the way, as well as what we kind of do in that space and what some of our customers are doing. So sit back and relax, and let's just talk kind of through this a little bit. Interestingly enough, the 0 to 400 maturity here is almost the inverse from a roles perspective that the DevOps is. And by that, I mean, in the DevOps space, a lot of times we're starting with, shall I say, the less technical people. We're starting with, development managers, as well as, stakeholders and other people that are helping drive some of the decision-making process. And then we're working our way up to implementing actual IT platforms from left to right. On the data intelligence side, we're typically starting with the more IT-centric functions and moving to knowledge workers or information workers on the 400 level. So we're actually kind of going typically to more technological folks to a somewhat less technological. And that definition can somewhat vary, right? Because as new roles obviously become defined in organizations, knowledge managers may or may not be specifically a technology role. But generally speaking, I just think that's a kind of a fascinating premise to this whole thing. The way we look at this is when you achieve a certain maturity level here, let's say you achieve 100, we are assuming that you have mastered maturity in that section. And so that's not to say that you maybe are not dabbling in some of the things at the higher end of the spectrum. But when we talk about reaching maturity at Planet, and in specifically this model, as our cloud strategists work with individuals, this is really about ubiquitous usage of the technology at that tier. So I just want to be clear on that. And in some of these swim lanes, in the cloud maturity model, we understand that some of it's somewhat circular and not necessarily linear in fashion, right? It's not a one size fits all, but we believe it's a broad brush that kind of paints our vision of the story of how we would expect adoption to work. So just kind of looking first at level zero. Level zero, again, we're working very much so with technical folks, typically network engineers, SQL engineers, potentially their managers. There is some work that's being done with with stakeholders that might be involved, such as those that are paying the bill, right? But at level zero, we're really starting to look at your on-premise workloads that you're doing. You may have no or very limited cloud adoption of any of the data tools that are available. Your reporting is traditionally centralized reporting tools like SQL reporting services or Crystal reports or tools like that potentially. And you may have just sort of information sprawl in various locations, Excel spreadsheets, access databases, that type of thing, as well as different flavors of SQL. A lot of our customers are running various versions of SQL Server, and one of the most common things that we're finding ourselves doing at this list level is just helping with understanding on-premise footprints and how to consolidate databases and upgrade databases at the same time, that type of thing. So, again, that's kind of what level zero is. But we really kind of get started at level 100. And at this point, we're still working primarily with technical individuals, and we're looking at that sort of traditional SQL Server lift and shift. So we do an enterprise cloud readiness program that is looking at your overall data center footprint and how that can be transformed into cloud services. And SQL is typically a part of that. In some cases, we're looking specifically at SQL Server workloads and just trying to figure out, both economically and technically what makes the most sense and help figure out a path to get there. There's a lot of ways for us to actually do that migration. We may use something like Azure Site Recovery. We may decide to use Backpacks and back up your data. We may even just choose to do some ETL type transactions into the cloud. So there's a lot of different ways that we can potentially get you moved. Our stance on this is that we're looking at the best fit from a cost model and a technical model. Obviously, a lot of times that's going to be used to use something like SQL Managed Instance. In other cases, you have some simple web applications that maybe have a SQL Server backend. We may find there's a significant cost savings to you to move to Azure Platform as a Service. And so, we may make those types of recommendations at this point. But we're really focused on moving transactional database workloads and connecting the applications, whether they be in virtual machines or on-prem, through some sort of VPN or express route connection. And then dashboarding and reporting using Power BI is another area that we look at level 100. A lot of customers may even continue to keep their transactional operational databases on-prem and simply just want to focus on reporting. And so, we're assuming that some level of reporting and dashboarding will be done at Power BI at that level. And that's kind of starting to get out of the IT bottleneck of having to create reports and get into sort of that democratized reporting scenario that most organizations see a huge value out of. Okay, at level 200, we are now adding value to the data estate that you have by looking at the different types of data and thinking forward to what the future state might be. So a lot of times customers will say that they are just interested in getting to the cloud, potentially to save costs. There could be licensing reasons, like their licenses are to expire and they don't want to have to deal with truing up those on-prem, or there's a number of reasons, but sometimes we find that folks are in a hurry to get there and they want to think about transformation secondarily. And so level 200 is all about that. And we do a lot of sort of envisioning and thinking through that process at this level. Um, but we are very, very focused on trying to figure out what types of data represent sort of your entire state moving forward. So what does that look like from a strategic perspective? Some of your information may live in Office 365, for example. Other types of data, may be Excel data that needs to go into, Azure Table Storage, or could go into directly into a data store like Azure Data Lake and be queried directly from Power BI. Those types of options are things that we want to think through with you. A lot of times we're also thinking through sort of the data flows and how data has to move in and out of the system at this point. Ultimately, the endpoint here is how users interact with that data. And that gets up in the further areas of maturity as far as what that user experience looks like. But we're really, really focused on thinking through some of that at this point because we want to make sure we're setting up an environment that's going to allow for that transformation to blossom kind of in your organization. At this particular level, we're also thinking about things like historical data through data warehousing and how to offload some of that. And we're assuming that at this point you're starting to sort of widen your usage of Azure capabilities, and so data governance, security, and continuous assurance become more and more important at this point. So that is not to say that we don't think about security at level 100. We absolutely do. I mean, you have very critical data most of the time in those SQL databases that are being moved, and so we have to think about that. But there's a big difference in the security models across different data platform capabilities that we have to be aware of. If you're using blob storage, for example, we have to consider the difference between how we secure containers or how we secure blobs, and the fact that you may not have the granularity you would have using other Azure data platform capabilities, and so that's a big part of what we do. The Azure Data Share Preview was launched this summer, and that was all about sharing data across tenants. And I, for one, am super excited about that. But as I talk to my organizations about that, I say, you know, Office 365 external sharing is a governance control that is always considered in every engagement that we do. And even more importantly, you need to be very, very thoughtful in what your external data sharing policies are going to be for this information that is now living in not only one tenant, but potentially shared across multiple tenants. So that's a big thing that we try to think about. We're looking at roles and responsibilities, and we're putting in different types of policies to prevent drift. So we want to ensure that whatever uh, uh, controls we're setting up, whatever types of data sources we're setting up, cannot be modified, or at least if they are modified, the implications of that are understood and audited. So that's what level 200 is all about. At level 300, we are assuming now you have a much larger data footprint, and because of the different types of data that you might be working with, structured, unstructured, you are now going to want to take more advantage of advanced capabilities of Power BI. And this is where we get into writing queries in M, doing sort of advanced visualizations. Uh, the Power BI data flows was a capability that I talked about back in the spring, which is a Power BI premium feature that allows you to centralize your different data sets across your organization versus keeping them in an individual Power BI report. So, that might be a capability that you might want to look into. How you interact through websites using Power BI embedded may be a capability here. So, we're just at this point trying to say there's going to be more advanced capabilities due to the expanded use of the platform, and this is where customers would kind of take that on. Um, Additionally, some of the analytics processes, such as Azure Data Lake Analytics, may start to come to fruition here as well, as you're thinking about trying to do some level of data science for analysis and reporting. At level 300, and really more going into level 400, we start to see a shift in audience. We're still working with technical folks, but we're also at this point very, very interested in talking to the information workers, people that may or may not be classified as knowledge managers in your organization, or are working through different types of document data classification. Because at this particular level, we've gotten to the point now where we have different types of documents and different types of data sets that are relational in fashion. We may have um, IoT data potentially that might be coming in from sensors, depending on the organization you're working in, that sit out in blob storage, event hubs, different places like that. And so there's information that is runs the gamut of your Azure cloud. And what we want to try to do at this point is take that and gain further insights on it. And the Microsoft has essentially a product that they call knowledge mining in the commercial clouds, which at this point is based on their cognitive services capabilities as well as their Azure Search capabilities. And and so we work with customers at this point to try to help them identify specific workloads or topics that we would like to surface through the process of knowledge mining for the purpose of applications, bots, potentially surfacing that information into Teams or Office 365 proper. And so, you may have any number of topics in your organizations. Typically, at this point, it's very industry specific or vertical specific, and we are working to help you identify those topics, create models that would be applied to different types of documents or data in your Azure tenant, and classify that information, train the models, and start to build a real a real knowledge store that can be used for finding information in your organization more quickly. And that information could be proprietary, um, technical specifications. It could be, job experiences. It could be, invoice data. It could be any number of types of information. So that's really what we focus on at this particular level. So once you've gotten through level 400, we're assuming that you've kind of gone through quite a bit of a transformation process. This um, this journey is sort of an evolving one. We do a lot of pilots, proof of concepts with groups to kind of help train them on how to use these services. In some cases, we're actually building the reports, we're building the models. There's a number of different ways we can engage, but our goal at this point is to get customers to start thinking about the different types of capabilities that are available in Azure to them early on, have us help them develop a strategic plan for how they want to adopt it, and just start simple, pick a few tactical workloads, even if it's a matter of just trying to save a few dollars, moving some databases to Azure SQL DB as a service, and then slowly build on top of that. And that's what we're finding most of our customers do, and they're evaluating that process as they go along. Well, I want to thank you so much for your time today. And as always, I look forward to any feedback you have, and we'll look forward to doing this again next month.